Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very excited to have Lawrence Boel on the podcast today. Lawrence is an author, a property investor, and a property coach, and he's got quite an alternative approach. I'm very excited because I think there's a lot of misinformation out there around property investment and how to go about it. And I know Lawrence has got a very he's got a very good framework for how he does property investment. So welcome to the show, Lawrence. Why don't you start by just telling everybody a little bit about yourself and how you kind of got into the property investment space?
Cool. Thanks for having me. It's cool to be on this platform. And I love any platform where I get to share my alternative ideas because I think we can break down some barriers and show a different side to property that maybe not everybody's accustomed to. So as you said, I'm a published author. I've written a couple of books. I invest in property. I teach others to do the same. And I have a few other income streams. My passion is making money, but my passion is also doing the things that I love, which is why I decided to become financially free or started taking the actions to get there. How I got into property, first of all, my dad was a very good entrepreneur growing up. And I think this was a massive advantage that I had over other people. But at the dinner table, my dad would talk about investments. He'd talk about investing in stock, investing in a business, buying property. And like when you're a young, impressionable mind and your father figure who you look up to is talking about these things, you naturally build an interest in it. Then school happened, which I think was unfortunate because what school does is it teaches you how to be an employee.
Yeah.
If you think about it, education hasn't changed in 200 years, and look at how the landscape of work has changed. So is education still relevant to getting us where we need to be, especially with the AI conversation coming in? Anyway,
Yes.
So I did what education told me, what my school, my teachers, my friends all told me: study hard, get a degree, work in corporate, go up the ladder. And I tried that for a year or two and I got fired.
Wow.
And that made me realize that relying on one income stream is super risky. And that's then when I started looking for alternatives. I went to a whole bunch of like networking events, the Amways and those multi-level marketing. I stumbled across a property course through Robert Kiyosaki, author of Rich Dad, Poor Dad. I think that just triggered something in me to say, let's explore this. Because Robert Kiyosaki is US-based, his book is US-based, his content is US-based, it's not relevant for us. But it opened the door to thinking, could property be a supplementary income? And yeah, after I got fired, I had plenty of time, plenty drive, and that's how I started getting into property.
Wow. So it took something like quite big to get you into the space. I think that's a story with most people. And you started, I've also read that book, Rich Dad, Poor Dad, and also like it opens your mind to assets, not liabilities, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, very interesting to hear that that's the way you got into it.
Yeah.
But to start off the podcast, maybe we can start let's look at this from a beginner perspective. If you're a beginner getting into property investment, because I think obviously there being a lot of misinformation, maybe we should start from the beginning. So if someone's starting from scratch, maybe they have some savings, maybe not, what's the first thing they should do before buying an investment property?
So I think there's 4 things that one needs to invest successfully in property. Number 1, you need knowledge. Number 2, you need affordability. Number 3, you need seed capital. And number 4, you need a good credit score. So knowledge is simple. You can't invest without knowledge. The more you learn, the more you earn. Affordability is your disposable income. So if you're earning 20,000, you're spending 20,000, you've got no affordability. The bank's not going to lend to you. And without using the bank to scale this, don't buy property. Property is there because you can use other people's money. The seed capital is you need some money for deposit, transfer fees, renovations. There is some money that you need, not necessarily all the whole purchase price. You just need a portion of it. And a credit score. You need to have a solid credit score because that shows the bank that you know how to handle debt. I often say that property is a debt-based business. So if you don't like debt or don't know how to use debt, then property might not be the asset class that you really want to explore, because the value proposition in property is using other people's money to scale. Whereas stocks, you can't go to the bank and say, I want a loan to buy stock. That doesn't work that way. So property has got that competitive edge. So I think if you've got those 4 things, you can get started. Then it depends on what kind of strategy or area you're targeting, how much of these things you need. So like seed capital, if you do my model, which is the affordable housing sector, and you go into Joburg CBD, you're buying a property there for 200,000-300,000. So you only need about 50 to 100,000 of seed capital for the deposit, the transfer fees, etc. If you're doing an Airbnb or you're doing a luxury purchase here in Cape Town, your seed capital requirements will be substantially larger. But you could get started in property with 50,000, as long as you've got the disposable income and affordability, good credit history, and some decent knowledge.
I wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know that you can book a 30-minute call with me. Just click on the link in the description below, fill in your details, and we'll chat. Cheers. So basically, the first thing, you kind of need to build up that credit score. What's the easiest way to kind of build up your credit score?
This might be a bit controversial, but what I recommend is you get a credit card and you use it like a debit card.
I see.
So you're going to buy petrol today or this week. You're going to buy groceries. You're going to buy these things that are part of your budget, the part of your living costs. Putting it on your debit card gives you no benefit. Putting it on your credit card means you're taking a little bit of debt from the bank, and at the end of the month, before you get exposed to interest, you pay back that credit card. In that way, you're getting your credit history to be built up. You're showing the bank, look, I'm taking 100 here, 1,000 here, 500 here, and you pay it back at the end of the month. And every time you do that, you're showing the bank, I know how to deal with credit. And most credit cards give you a 60-day window before they start charging you interest. So as long as you pay back your debt by the end of the month, you've got a free win.
I see. And when you say the affordable housing sector, what made you choose that sort of investment that over, let's say, more luxury properties? What's the difference between the affordable housing sector and, let's say, investing in 2-bedroom apartments in Greenpoint, for example?
So in property, I think there's two main ways you can make money, right? You've got rental yield and you've got capital gains. Rental yield is when you buy a property where the rent can cover the bond, the rates and taxes, all of those expenses, and you're left with a bit of margin. And then you've got the capital gains where you're funding that shortfall month on month, but in 10 years' time, the property doubles in value or triples in value. So depending on what your goal is, you're going to change strategy. So for me, my goal was replace my income as soon as possible. I just lost my job. I was desperate. I didn't want to be tied to one income stream or one boss. So for me, cash flow made the most sense. So I started with the affordable housing because your rental yield and potential for rental profits is substantially higher than the capital gain side. So what I do is I buy 5 cash flow assets and then I'll buy 1 capital gains asset, using this one's profit to fund this one's shortfall, because this one gives me the long-term generational wealth. This one gives me the immediate short-term gain.
I see. Wow, that's very clever. And a lot of people make rookie mistakes when they jump into property investment. What's the number one thing that gets people into trouble?
I think buying with emotion, not logic. I can't tell you how many of my coaching students will tell me, I loved it. I walked through that kitchen and I could see myself living there, and I saw the garden and I could imagine my kids playing there, and it's just, the finishings were exactly what I've always wanted, and it reminded me of my grandma's place. And all I'm thinking is you're buying with emotions, and investing and emotions don't go hand in hand. Now, if you're buying your primary residence, different story. Sit with your wife or your partner, make sure you guys love it. Close to schools, close to the amenities, it's got all the finishings that you love, and pay the premium price because you're buying there with your heart, that's the decision. But if you're buying for financial gain, make sure there's financial gain. Make sure you've analyzed your deal, you've run your numbers, and that it meets your requirement.
I see. And what's your requirement? What sort of financial gain are you looking at when you look at a property? What's that financial gain for you?
I have a set of criteria, but the minimum criteria would be a rental yield of 20% or more. So that would be on gross revenue divided by purchase price. For internal rate of return, I look at 15% as a minimum benchmark for residential, 20% or more for commercial. And it needs to be cash flow positive from day one, even when debt is included. My first investment was a 2-bedroom property in an affluent suburb in Johannesburg, and I funded my tenant's lifestyle for 10 years with zero gain. So I'll never buy a property again that I have to fund unless my cash flow investments are funding the shortfall.
Okay, wow. And for all those who don't understand what cash flow means, I mean, obviously that is basically when the cost of owning that property and the income you receive from the rental is covering basically covering that cost. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah, so you've got operating costs and you've got revenue. So if you think of it like any business has revenue and expenses. In property, you've got rental income, and then you've got expenses, rates, levies, insurance, management, maintenance, bad debts, bond repayments, all of these expenses. So if you've got a property with an expense base of 10,000 Rand and an income base of 9,000, you're at a cash flow negative position where you have less revenue than expenses, and that difference you're financing with your salary, meaning you're reducing your affordability. The reverse is also true. If it's got 10,000 income, a 9,000 expense, you're walking away with a profit, and that's a minimum indicator for me. It has to be positive, not negative.
Okay, and that's basically how you create that passive income, where you can almost, if you wanted, you could stop working if you bought enough of these properties, and you just need a good manager in place to make sure things are streamlined.
That's
Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Awesome. I wanted to quickly interrupt this episode to tell you about my foreign exchange partners, Currencies Direct. Currencies Direct are a foreign exchange company who will help you move your money in or out of South Africa. They deal with all the admin and the red tape that come with doing that, so that you don't have to. And their services are completely complimentary. If you need to reach out to one of their specialists, contact me and I'll put you in touch with them today. Let's talk about what makes a good deal. How do you personally spot a property that's going to make you money versus one that's going to be a money pit?
So again, you got to understand the context that I come from. Like, I've got a bit of an unconventional approach, and I target a very specific requirement, which is cash flow. So I look at investments not in terms of what do I think the capital gain potential is going to be in the future. I look at it, what's the rental yield. So I look at three things. I look at yield, risk, and location. So yield, you take your gross revenue divided by your purchase price. It gives you a percentage of what the revenue is in relation to the purchase price. If it's above 20%, that's a good indicator for me. That means that the properties are cheap enough for the rent to cover all those expenses and leave me with some gain. The second is risk. So I look at tools like TPN or Lightstone to understand delinquency rates and what's the affordability like of the tenants living in that area. What's the education levels? Is there a good payment profile of the tenants living there? And then the final one is location. So I want to be close to economic activity. Because I'm targeting the affordable housing section, I want to be close to Joburg CBD. That's where the economic hustle is. And additionally, the property prices aren't appreciating, which means I'm buying at a nice discount and I get that rental yield that I'm looking for. And then also location's important when you're thinking council. Like, that's the biggest risk in my model. It's not the tenants, it's not hijacked buildings or evictions or all of that stuff. I mean, that's part of the territory, but the bigger risk is that the city of Johannesburg is completely mismanaged. And I mean, as an example, I pay my municipal accounts on time every single month. And yet, without fail, my buildings will be switched off because council was reading the wrong meter. And they thought the hijacked building down the street was my building, and then they switch off water. Now my tenants are upset. Now they're threatening to move. Not because of anything I've done wrong or anything that my team's done wrong, but because you're working with, an incompetent municipality. So that's actually the bigger risk for me, and understanding how I can mitigate that is important.
Quite an interesting. You've got to take in so many factors when it comes to doing this. So you mentioned Joburg CBD.
Yeah.
Why Joburg CBD, and like how did you actually understand when did the penny drop and you realized that Joburg CBD was the place to invest your money?
So this was after that four-ways property that I bought. And the context I had when I bought that first property, and I was about 23 at the time, the context I had was property is always an investment and shortfalls are normal. Like, that's part of the game. You can have a shortfall for 5 to 10 years, but over time, rental escalations, capital gains, everything will be fine. But what I realized is that I was subsidizing my tenants' lifestyle, and I went back to the bank because I wanted to get more lending. I wanted to buy my next investment. And they're like, no, dude, you're not making enough money. Your salary is being eaten up by this liability that you bought. I was like, no, it's an asset. It's an asset on my books. And they said, yes, it's an asset in 10 years' time when your cash flow improves. So that for me was a trigger to say, I'm in the wrong market. I'm in the wrong area. Something's not working here. So I decided to go on Property 24, and I put in the field, I put in Gauteng, and I searched everything, and then I went low to high. I put the filter on, and I said, what's the cheapest property in the whole of South Africa? And this area called Hillbrow popped up. I'm sure you've heard of Hillbrow.
Heard of Hillbrow, not good things.
And it's called Drug Hill for a reason, you know?
Wow.
And the property was listed for like 50 grand or something for 2 bedrooms property. So I went to go and view it. And I mean, it was obviously a hijack situation, and like I was freaked out. And obviously I didn't buy that one, but I kept researching. And about 6 months in, I found a deal where it looked good. The seller was motivated. I bought the property for 180,000. It was a 96 square meter property.
Wow.
For 180,000 rand.
Jeez.
And then we subdivided it. We put some drywalling in. We turned it from a large 1 bed into a 3 bed, and we had 3 different tenants, and it was making 6 grand per month.
Gee whiz. So you were cash flow positive, probably being able to finance your
100%
other
finance.
property as well. Sure.
I got 100% finance on the deal, and it was 2 grand positive at the end of all my expenses. Now I had to do some eviction because the one tenant became delinquent, and there were some headaches and whatever. But once I got that operating, that 2 grand I could take back to the bank, and the bank's like, oh, you've got more affordability. Let's give you some more money. And then I bought the next one and the next one, and I scaled to about 15 units in Hillbrow.
Wow.
And then I came across a very big risk, which is the council and the body corporate. The buildings weren't being maintained and all of that.
Gee whiz. So what do you do about the council? You can't really do much about the council. You just got to carry on going and just hope that it improves, I guess.
Yeah, council, you got no control. But the body corporates, my exit there was to sell everything in Hillbrow and go buy a block of flats myself, because then I'm the body corporate. I control the maintenance of the building. I control the tenants that come in. I can do the eviction. So, because if you're buying the best unit in the wrong building, you've made a bad purchase. But if you buy the whole building, you can course correct it. You can fix it. And that's kind of the pivot that I took to blocks of flats, is to maintain the control of the body corporate.
So I guess a monopoly, that's like buying a hotel almost. So, do you own any buildings? Yeah, right now.
Yeah,
Sure.
probably close to 40, I think.
Wow, 40 buildings. Gee whiz.
I know.
So
Not on my own. I have lots of
Oh, yeah.
JVs, and I use private finance to scale. I don't own that many in my own capacity. But my model is to do JVs. So I connect with people like you, or 5 people. We pull our capital together. We go and find a transaction. I do everything. I find the deal, manage it, etc. And then I take a sweat equity fee for putting the deal together.
So is that what you were talking about? I've been following you on social media, YouTube. When you say you do like partner deals, that's what you mean by JV. You basically people can then contact you if they want to get into property investment. You obviously will then go and do all the legwork basically to find these deals, and then they just give you the money, and then you pay them out at the end of the month when the rental comes in.
That's exactly it, yeah.
Wow, that's amazing. So you're the guy to connect with if you want to get into property.
If you want if you want to get into high yielding, affordable property, but you're scared to do it on your own, you've got some money sitting in the bank that's not operating at the level you want it to, I'm the guy to talk to, yes.
Okay, awesome, sure. So you guys heard it first. So if I'm looking for my first investment property, what should I be analyzing about the area, the property, or the financials before making an offer?
So again, my context is affordable housing, and that's what I can speak to. So it's probably different in the affluent sector. But in terms of financials, you want to see proof of income and proof of expense. Proof of income is important because you want to know how many tenants there are in the building and what their arrears are. So before I make a purchase, well, usually what happens is you'll find a deal, you'll sign an offer to purchase subject to a 2-week due diligence period. And then during that due diligence, you do proof of income, proof of expense, etc. And then at the end of the 2 weeks, you can decide to proceed with the OTP, or you can back out because due diligence failed. So during that due diligence, you want to see proof of income. How many bad tenants do I have in the building? What's their arrears level? And arrears is normal in the affordable housing sector because your tenants are a little bit more susceptible to economic swings. So you expect to see that. But if you know that half the building is in arrears, the other half they're not paying at all, you're probably in a hijack situation, and you're going to have to mitigate that with an eviction budget and a renovation budget. So you can kind of figure out your numbers. So proof of income, proof of expense, you want to see utility statements, levy statements, insurance statements, maintenance, annual financial statements if the property is owned in a company. And then proof of condition. So those are the three: income, expense, condition. Condition is get a inspector in there. What structural damage is there? What kind of renovations do you need to go through? If you're not buying the whole block of flats, you're buying a sectional title unit in a block of flats, then you have to do the financials of the body corporate.
I see. And can that get you in trouble if the financials aren't great in a body, just for a beginner who's never heard of this stuff? How can that get you in trouble if the financials are bad of the body corporate?
So it depends. The financials just show you the health of the body corporate. So there's many different red flags within an annual financial statement. So number one, let's say that there's very little spend towards municipal accounts. Then that's probably telling you that the body corporate's not paying electricity. They're not paying for water. Eventually, council's going to come and switch off the meters. What's going to happen to your tenant? Tenant's not going to be happy that there's no water, there's no electricity. If they've got very little spend on maintenance, most of these big buildings have lifts. If they're not having like 5,000 to 10,000 Rand per month as a contribution just to the lifts, then that lift is going to break down. If your unit's on the 23rd floor, you're not going to get a tenant in there. So your annual financial statement shows you how they are operating. Are they operating at a profit or a loss? Are they contributing enough to maintenance and to these key expenses? And if not, your option is don't buy the property, one, or buy the property, but then get yourself on the board of trustees and try and course correct the building.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay. Wow. And then if you were starting again today, knowing everything you know now, how would you do it differently?
Jeez. I wouldn't have bought that four-ways property for sure. That was a complete emotional purchase and definitely the worst financial decision I've made, but I guess that taught me a bit. I would have gone straight into cash flow from day one. Another thing that was key is that when I got fired, I decided not to go back to corporate. And that was an ego play. Because I was like, I wanted to sit at a braai and tell my friends, I'm an entrepreneur, I'm self-employed. I don't need this corporate stuff. And it fed my ego. I felt like I've made it. But back at the ranch, I was eating 2-minute noodles and I was like struggling to survive. I was building websites and like writing articles to try and make a little bit of money just so that I could get to the end of the month. And that ego stopped me from going back to corporate, getting a stable income and using that income to compound and buy more properties. If I'd gone back to corporate for 5-10 years, gone up with increases and used my disposable income more wisely to buy more properties, I'd be 10 years further than I am now. But my ego got in the way because I wanted to be self-employed. I wanted to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah, I think being an entrepreneur, obviously I'm kind of an entrepreneur, but I'm not really an entrepreneur agent. But being a commission earner, it's also difficult to get that, to get finance from the bank. You've got to have all those financials, and I can see how that maybe could have held you back a little bit as well. And I think a lot of people kind of avoid going into that sort of like corporate setting because they're kind of like too proud and they want to be like the startup guy or whatever. So maybe there's some value that all the youngsters that are listening out there, maybe rather go learn a bit, get a stable income. And then if this is something you want to get into, then it's going to be much easier to get financing and things like that and get started in this. And then that could be your channel to being an entrepreneur. Then you can go and do those passion projects. And maybe you can tell everybody about like your life now, like how has investing in property changed your life? I wanted to interrupt this episode to tell you about one of my sponsors, Van Zyl Kruger Attorneys. I've been working with Van Zyl Kruger Attorneys since I started in the real estate industry, and I can honestly say that they have never let me down on a single transaction. So if you are looking for a transferring attorney on the next sale of your property, then do not hesitate to contact Van Zyl Kruger Attorneys. I've left their details in the comments of this episode, so you can find them there and reach out to them. And if you need any other legal advice, they can also assist you. So don't hesitate to reach out.
Yo. Geez, Louise, eh? If I go back to 12 years ago, the day I got fired, I mean, my context was pretty bleak. I had about 50,000 Rand in credit card debt. I had no assets, no income, no savings. I had this property that I'd bought. And I had to, I literally, my income streams at that stage was writing. I was writing articles for like 10 cents a word. Before ChatGPT, you couldn't just, I actually had to sit there and think up words. I did websites. I used Wix and I built websites. And I was literally hustling just to try and cover. And I probably went through about 2 years of very inconsistent income and really tough times. And I dreamt of where I would be in 10 years. Wow. And where I am now is probably further on than I thought it would be, because back then my paradigm was so small and much more narrow. My life today is pretty cool. I work pretty much a normal 9 to 5 like you would. But my time is spread between multiple income streams, and I call them my projects as opposed to work. So I'll do probably 2 hours per day on content, social media, doing short videos, doing reels, doing articles, that kind of stuff. I love the expression of content. I do about 2 hours on startups, prop tech, reaching out to startup companies to try and invest or to coach or to direct. I like helping small companies and I like getting invested. I do 2 hours. I've got still a corporate job.
Okay.
But it's very different, because now that I'm financially independent, I'm not a slave to my boss, right? So if he says to me, Lawrence, you got to work this weekend, I can say no. And if he threatens to fire me, it's not the end of the world. So the dynamic between me and him has changed.
Sure.
And also it's a US-based company, so they just really want me to be awake during their core hours. And because of the time difference, it means there's 2 hours a day we have to actually be involved in the company.
Wow.
And then I do property for another 2 hours. So I've got a normal 8 to 5. I'm really busy. But now I've just got a sense of security. So I don't have to work anymore. I still love to, and I probably will till I have kids, and then I'll probably slow down.
Amazing. And any plans to have kids? It's on the way?
Yeah, the missus has been talking my ear off about it. One of the main reasons that I went on this journey was to have more time with my kids, because my dad, as much as he was a good entrepreneur and a good businessman, that consumed his life for a large part of my childhood. And I'm grateful that he did provide a lot of resources, and he gave us a good upbringing, but he wasn't really as present as I would have liked him to be. And I guess that's my drive, is to be the more present dad that my dad wasn't able to be, because he was obviously out there hustling himself.
Wow. Amazing. So that's kind of what drives you now.
Yeah. You go through different stages, right? So like I went through the survival stage. And those first 2-3 years, I'm just trying to get by. And then you get a bit of stability, and then you want to grow, and then you want to scale. Then you reach a level where, because I call them 4 levels, right? You've got financial stability, security, independence, and freedom. So financial security is when your active income equals your lifestyle. So you've just got a normal job, a salary, and you can live a decent lifestyle. That's security. That's stability, sorry. Security is when you've got active income, but you've also got passive income. And the passive income that you don't necessarily work for, don't invest a lot of time into, equals your basic needs, like food, shelter, car. You can't live an extravagant lifestyle. You can't go out for dinner dates, but you can survive. That's security. Then independence is you can maintain your current lifestyle with your passive income. And then you got freedom. That's where you can buy the island, buy the cars, buy everywhere, whatever you want.
Sure.
And when you break it down that way, it's actually quite it's feasible. Security is a 2-year plan, or 3-year plan for most people.
So just touch on that again. Security is basically when your passive income covers all your expenses.
Your basic
needs. So your housing, food, all that sort of stuff. Okay.
Yeah.
Petrol.
Yeah. So for most people, that's like, should we say 15 to 20 grand? I mean, it depends.
Yeah.
I guess there's so many different contexts out there. But, if you need 20 grand passively, using my model of the low affordable housing sector, you're going to need 20 properties. roughly. 20 each giving you 1,000 Rand in cash flow, you've reached your goal. And these are cheap
Sure.
properties, right? It's not like we're buying 20 million Rand properties here. We're buying a 200,000 Rand property here.
Okay.
So 20 properties, which you can buy maybe over a 5-year period, that's 4 per year. You've got financial security in 5 years.
Wow. Sure. That's
So
when you look at it
that's-
that way, it's kind of exciting.
Yeah.
You know? The people cotton onto it and they kind of get involved. Obviously, there's so many different ways to reach that, but if it's through property, I think it's super exciting.
Yeah. And then independence is that current lifestyles being maintained. So let's say it's 30,000. Well, now you need 30 properties of the same 1,000 Rand cash flow per unit kind of model. And you've reached that goal. And now 30 properties might sound like crazy. You're like, what? 30 properties? But what if you're buying blocks of flats? If you're buying a block of 10 units, you need 3 purchases and you're financially independent.
Sure. That's when you look at it that way, it sounds
Or one
so
block
easy.
of 30 units.
Yeah.
You know?
And I wanted to get into the whole financing side of things. And like obviously when you know, obviously it's maybe it's about getting that first property and like getting finance for that first property and making sure it's cash flow positive. Once you've done that, is it much easier? Because I'll admit I'm not a property investor. I'm an aspiring property investor. Obviously being in the property industry myself, I want to buy property and I want to make money from property and get into maybe a similar situation that you're in. So once you've bought that first one, is the bank more likely to lend for the second one? How does it work?
Yeah. So, I mean, your different lenders will have different criteria. So like your bank finance, your big commercial banks, the ABSAs and FNBs, you know, they're very strict, but they offer infinite finance at cheap rates. But their criteria is affordability, credit score, seed capital. So those are the key things that you need. Once you buy a cash flow positive property, that increases your affordability.
Okay.
So this is where most people get stuck. Okay, all of us think, or like I used to think, you buy a property and you have a shortfall. That's normal. But then you're hitting a ceiling, an affordability ceiling, because every negative cash flow property that you buy, what's it doing to your salary? It's eroding it.
Yes.
Until eventually you get to a point where you go to the bank says, wait until you've got better affordability, get a salary increase. But with my model, the reverse is true. Your salary is here, and every new cash flow property that you buy, your affordability goes up and up and up, and technically you could get infinite lending from the bank.
Wow.
So that's option one. Then you've got commercial banks. They're less interested in affordability, more interested in the business case of you as the investor, but also the deal. So if the deal makes fantastic cash flow and you've got good evidence, you don't even need necessarily a salary or affordability. The bank will loan to you if you've got some credibility. And then private finance, which is my favorite, that's getting money from you or Steven or Sfiso or whoever you want, you need credibility. So my recommendation is you start with bank money and your money. You build a model that works. You create a brand like you've done very successfully. You start showing people what you're capable of, and then you can tap into other people's money, private finance, and that's when you can scale.
Sure. So it's creating that credibility first, and then it's much easier to finance. And then you're making other people money as well, which must feel pretty good as well.
No, of course. I mean, if we're all making money, and that was my journey. I started with the bank's money. I got to those 15 properties in Hillbrow all through the bank's money, but everyone was cash flow positive, adding to my affordability, giving me more credibility with the bank. And then when I sold all of those and I bought my first block of flats, I created a quick video on YouTube. And I mean, this is when it really hit for me that I was onto something. Once I put that video up, I had this guy, he's a South African, he's a pilot. I'm not going to mention his name because that's, against Poppy and whatever, but he's a pilot. And he phoned me from wherever he was at the time, Mauritius or whatever. And he's like, I like what you do. I've got 1.5 million. I've been looking for an investment opportunity. Let's JV. And I didn't even think of that. I mean, I just put the content out. This is what I've done. And he's like, I've got money. I want you to do the same for me. And I did a deal completely with his money and the bank's money. I didn't put anything in. And I bought a block of 6 units.
With 1.5 million rand.
Yeah.
That sounds like a block of flats. Sounds like a lot of money, but I guess in the affordable housing sector, it's not as much as I'm conceiving it. I'm thinking millions here. Obviously, it's probably a couple of million, but not that much.
No, I mean, a block of, if I'm looking in Joburg for a block of, let's say 10 units, I'm looking at 2 million as the total purchase price.
Wow.
2 million.
Gee whiz.
That'll bring in 40 to 45,000 in revenue. Yeah, but that's what I'm saying.
Okay.
That's the,
Gee
you
whiz.
know, you take 2 million here in Cape Town. Let's say here in, maybe you can get something in OBS for 2 million, and then your rental will be what, 18,
Yeah.
15 maybe.
You're not going to cash flow.
No.
Sure.
But then you don't get the capital gains, right? Joburg, there's no growth.
Yeah.
But you're getting rental yield. So if your strategy is cash flow, then that's where the market is. If you're looking for long-term gains, you know, like sometimes I think somebody loves their job and they just want to do property on the side. I'm like, invest in Cape Town because in 10, 15 years' time, the property is going to grow if you don't mind funding the shortfall. But some people hate their job and want to be out immediately.
Yeah.
Then cash flow makes sense.
Wow. Yeah. That's. I love my job. Don't get me wrong, but I love some passive income as well. It's nice to have that security of passive income.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's amazing. So I've also seen that you just invested in your first commercial property, and obviously I can see you kind of like you come from more of a residential, and that's where you're comfortable. What kind of made you want to get into the commercial space, and maybe talk me through how that deal kind of unfolded, and what made you excited about doing that deal?
So why we did it, I think, you know, as a good investor would always say, diversification is key. Having all your eggs in the lower income residential market probably doesn't make sense long term. So we started looking at, do we want to put some money in Cape Town for capital gains or into commercial or industrial and try and diversify? And yeah, we came across this deal, but this deal was a story. Eh? This has been a 2-year negotiation. So we found the deal through an agent. And we started running the numbers. We got excited because the revenue was insane. And then we started speaking to the seller. And the seller's old. They wanted to retire. They had all of the stuff. The problem is there were 4 shareholders that owned the building. And one of the shareholders had passed away.
Oh, wow.
So deceased estate.
Sure.
Oh, what a nightmare. What an absolute nightmare. For anybody listening, deceased estate, you can add an extra 6 to 12 months to the negotiation and the transfer window because your executor has to get involved and it's all nonsense. So we started 2 years prior, we put in our offer. She said no. We put in our offer. She said no. 6 months later, we put in our offer. She said no. She kept saying no. She kept saying no. A year in, she said yes. But I need to get my other brother and sisters to say yes. So then another 6 months later, they all said yes. We thought the deal was done, and the executor, APSA, came in and said, no, we're not going to let you get this cheeky deal across the line. So they left the property on the market for another 6 months. They didn't get any leads, and eventually the seller came crawling back to us and said, look, is your offer still on the table? And we said, yes, minus $1 million.
Wow. So you got it for R1 million less than you bargained for. So
yeah, and this deal is incredible, man. I think the total cost is $7 million. Because we bought the shares in the PTY. We actually didn't buy the property, so no transfer fees were incurred, which is quite cool. And it makes over 200 per month in revenue.
Wow.
Yeah.
Gee whiz.
Insane.
And your tenants obviously a little bit more reliable. Well, it's businesses that are your tenants now, so it's not residential. So how do you find your tenants? How do you vet your tenants?
Yeah, so the nice thing about commercial is evictions are much easier. Because you just lock the door, they can't operate, they pay you almost the next day. So that's quite nice. Maintenance is also cheaper because they have to fit the bill. You know, you're not maintaining the building for them. You maintain the outside, but the inside they maintain. In terms of finding tenants, and I think that's where the risk profile of commercial differs a lot from residential. Residential, infinite demand. I empty a unit, I've got 10 people waiting in line to come and get that unit. It's very easy to fill. Commercial, it depends. You know, markets fluctuate. We're currently in a good position of about 92% occupancy, but we ran our numbers on 60%, and the number still made sense at 60. And that was, for us, a comfortable enough buffer. In terms of finding tenants, you go through agents, brokers, you get their financials, you make sure that they can operate profitably, that they're a good business, you give them a chance, you know.
Wow.
So it's kind of like...
And do you fit the bill for like a fit out? Like let's say a new person's, no. So they pay for everything?
I don't mind a fit out cost, but then your deposit has to match that.
Yeah.
You know?
Okay.
So if we're going to do a big fit out for you, we've got retail at the bottom. And the retail, I'd be more open to fitting out. But then the deposit has to match that because we're fitting the bill.
Yeah.
But in terms of the office space, I mean, it's very old school offices. It's nothing like fancy or anything, but it's relevant for the area.
Sure. Wow. and that thing is cash flow. It's one of the good performers in the portfolio.
Jeez, yeah. No, I mean, that was actually probably the moment I truly felt financially independent, because now my passive revenue exceeds my lifestyle cost off the back of that deal.
Gee whiz. How many deals have you counted how many deals you've done?
Yeah, I track it all the time. I've got 180 units.
180 units.
So
that's within JVs or just
within JVs? Yeah.
Okay, so with all the people that you work with.
Yeah. I probably own myself like 20 properties maybe.
Okay.
Or 20 of the units. But like my decision was simple. Do I want to have a big piece of a small pie, or do I want to have a smaller piece of a big pie? And for me, I wanted that big pie. I wanted that small piece of a big pie because I want to do something fantastic.
I wanted to interrupt this episode to let you know about Harcourt's Real Estate, one of my sponsors. As you know, I've been an agent with Harcourt's for over 3.5 years since I started my career in real estate, and I cannot recommend them enough. As an agent, they've provided me with the most amazing training through the Harcourt's Academy, and they train you all the way from being an intern to becoming a full status agent, taking care of a lot of the red tape and things that are not really fun as an intern as you train. And if you're a seller looking to sell your property, Harcourt's have the most amazing processes and technology that can help put your property at the forefront so that it gets sold in the best time and for the best price possible. If you need more details on Harcourt's, then please click on the link below. Wow. And the JVs, obviously, now that opens up a whole nother conversation.
Oh, gosh.
How do you run that like efficiently? Because obviously there's money coming into a bank account. That money then needs to be dispersed. Who has access to that account? Who controls that? That probably opens up a whole nother. We could probably do a whole podcast on that.
Yeah, I mean, private finance is every decision we make in life has got pros and cons. Private finance is fantastic for accessing money that you never knew existed, but now I've lost control.
Yeah.
So I might be financially independent and not have a boss, but I've got 20 shareholders that are my boss.
Yes.
So no, I mean, dealing with directorship, dealing with shareholders agreements, memorandums of incorporation, deciding on the dividends policy, having an accounting-based platform that everybody can see what the balance sheet and the income statement are. These are all things that I've learned along the journey. And you can get some systems and automation, you can delegate. And I think the most important thing is transparency. So I set up my group and I tell them this is the rules of engagement. If you want to join, this is how things are going to operate. I run it. I do these decisions. These are mitigations, but I'm upfront. It's like going on a date. Your Tinder profile is just the highlight reel of you. But when you're sitting down and you're deciding, is this going to be my partner for life? This is my criteria. I need this, 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 and this. And you're upfront about it instead of leading somebody on. That for me has been the biggest growth.
Okay, wow. So you've automated all that like management stuff, and then it's just making sure you're getting into bed with the right person. You don't want somebody who's going to come back and like start suing you for making X, Y, and Z decision.
But you also need contracts, eh? So I'm definitely above board with everything. If we're gonna get into bed or get into a marriage, we're gonna have a marriage contract. And that contract is going to stipulate what I can do, what you can do, etc. Do I want to keep doing private partnerships? No, I'd love to do this on my own. I would love to. I don't want to be reporting into anybody.
Yeah.
But I don't have that money yet. Maybe in 10 years' time, I'll be loaded and I can buy whatever I want. And my dream is I would love to be a developer. I'd love to go into like the township areas and build some proper respectable housing so that people don't have to live in those harsh conditions anymore. But money is a tool, and the more you can access it, the more you can do with life. So I'm open to using other people's money at this stage because I'm still infancy. I'm still in that infancy stage of my business.
That's exciting.
Yeah.
So maybe it'll be the property development coach soon. That'll be very cool. I'd love to see that. Well, yeah, thanks, Lawrence. Thanks so much for coming on the pod once again. This has been really valuable for me. I've learned a lot personally just from this episode, and I'm excited to start my property investment journey hopefully soon.
Lovely.
is there anywhere that people can, find you, reach out to you so that they can start their journey, get advice? Where would you say they should start, and where can they find you? Yeah.
Sure. Yeah, great question. So there's a couple of services that I offer. The first is a coaching service. So this is where I sit with you on a one-to-one, and I help you buy your first or next investment, and I essentially show you the blueprint, but you take action and you have control. The second option is partnership. So you want exposure to high value properties that are yielding great results, but you're scared to go into the market on your own. You can leverage me as the specialist. So those are my two main services. And then I've got a lot of content and books and all of those other things that are lower cost items. If you want to know anything, just follow me on social media, YouTube, Instagram. PropertyBull is my handle because my surname is Bull, and I'm bullish about the property market. So PropertyBull, YouTube for long form, Instagram for short form, and just hit me up on DM. I'll let you know how you can get in touch, or check out my website, lawrencebull.com. That's LAURENSBOEL.com.
Amazing. Thanks so much again. And if there's one last message you want to leave for the young people, because this podcast, I feel, is for the young people out there that are go-getters looking to make it in life, what's that message?
So my advice to the youngsters is to commit to a hard. Now, life is always going to be hard. Right? What's harder? To gym every day, eat healthy, and have a six-pack? That's hard, man. But to sit on the couch and eat what you want, but then you've got this body that you don't like and you're not able to attract the partner that you don't like, that's also hard. You got to choose your hard. Now, it's hard to not have money. It's hard to not have the health that you want. But it's also hard to do the graft, to do the effort. And I think if you want to be financially free, you have to have a 10, 15, 20-year outlook. You got to live frugally. I mean, even today, I'm technically financially free. I don't have to worry about money, but I live on a tight budget. You'll see my car when we go downstairs. I'm driving a 15-year-old Volvo.
Lovely.
15 years old, but you know what? It gets me from A to B. It doesn't cost me much. And now I've got more disposable income to keep investing. So I think the challenge that we have with youngsters today is TikTok, Uber, Tinder, all of these things you've got at the tip of your finger. You can resolve any need that you have. You're feeling lonely, go on Tinder. You're hungry, go on Uber Eats. You bored, go on to TikTok. And then you get this TikTok brain, and you get this instant gratification syndrome that's filtering into all youngsters, and they just want it like this. And they don't want to commit the 10, 15, 20 years hard to get to where they want to be. So instead, you do the easy thing, right? You chill, you don't worry, you don't invest, you don't save. Life's easy, but then late game, it gets hard. Or you do the hard stuff now. You live frugally, you invest, you don't go out and get drunk every other weekend, but you invest in your knowledge, you reinvest your salary, you live a frugal lifestyle. You do what is hard in the context of now so that tomorrow's much brighter, much easier. Then your life gets easy. Do the hard now, life becomes easy, or do the easy now, and then late game life gets hard.
That's a great message. Thanks so much.